Because I got a sort of a result, but it wasn't, the result really wasn't clear to me. It said I had laryngitis.
Yes.
Does that sound okay? Yeah, it said I had laryngitis, and then there was some, explanation.
And then I had an explanation of what laryngitis is.
Yeah.
It basically it has to do with not being clear. Your artist's voice is not clear because, and it sounds kind of silly, but I'm kind of trying to make it intriguing. and the closest thing I could come up with was the idea of losing your voice or not having a voice or not being clear on your voice. One of the things I've actually, and Jane knows about that. I think Kathy knows that I've talked about that is, one of the things that you get to a certain level of understanding and you maybe have a lot of skills down, but you really aren't clear on what your purpose is or what you're doing, and it really has to do, it's not so much at that point with, do I need another class on color or something like that. It has to do with a whole nother getting in touch with what you love and what
finding your muse.
Yes, getting in touch with what you love, getting in touch with your passion, your desires, and then feeling comfortable with that. And for me, I've been a plein air painter and I really enjoy that, but I'm finding that I'm almost attracted more to mystery than I am to clarity in my paintings. I want more of that. And so, but then there's the emotional struggle of dealing with everyone who expects you to paint a certain way. It's an adjustment to make that change. Why are you painting that way? What are you doing that? It's like, so maybe Jane can speak to that. Have you ever had you've made some changes in your...
It's interesting you brought that up. One of the gals at our studio left. Well, she's leaving in January, but she's very much I don't know how to describe her work, but it's very realistic. It's very easy to understand. People love it. But when you start to move beyond that, it becomes less about the general public understanding your work. And then where are you? Are you moving beyond that to something more? Do you want to stay in that comfort zone where people will walk, everyday person can walk in and say, oh. And when do you allow yourself to push beyond that? Or do you want to? I struggle with it every single day. And part of me wants to challenge myself to be something else. I know that in myself I want more. And yet you also, as a human being, want that everyday person to walk in and go, oh, I love that sunset. Or I love that, the plein air. I recognize it. And I feel like I'm in between. And do I want that approval? Do I want to move beyond to know that I'm pushing myself to something within me that is more than that? And so what you're saying is, I agree. I don't know. I feel like I'm in that place where I am struggling to figure out where I want to be. It's hard.
I know of stories like there was a professor at MyEd. He was actually the president of MyEd, and I should remember his name, and I cannot remember his name. He's recently retired, and then he moved out to Jefferson and took an old building and turned it into a studio. It's kind of really cool. But he had been painting paintings and had them shown at the Torrey Folliard Gallery. I don't, if you're from Milwaukee, you know where it is, but I know you might not be.
No, but I used to be, so I'm familiar with some of it. Yeah, thank you.
Well, it's one of the finer galleries in the state. He had his work in there, and it was more recognizable work. But as he went through some transitions in his life, he had some family difficulties and some other things that he made a whole series of paintings. They were about roads and choices, and they were kind of like looking down on the roads. You know, it's kind of like, instead of walking down a road, it was like, it had to do with the whole feeling of being in a different space and looking down at where you were. He was trying to work through his feelings in that time of transition. And people who had been buying his work were like, you know, because he had a collection, collectors that were regularly getting his work. And some of them didn't like it, but then he had to go through this phase where, you know, some of that wasn't selling, and then new people liked what he was doing. And then you have whether the gallery owner believes in you. But, you know, even then, I mean, that's kind of a high level experience. But if we have a close friend, or like I have this interest in abstraction because of my class, but I know from my experience with plein air that there are people in the plein air group that just, they're just, you know, they just hate it. And they just kind of groan at you, you know, and nobody likes to be groaned at, you know. So, you know, and I never, you almost have, you know, it's almost like a divorce in a way, you know. It's really weird. So a certain part has to be, well, how much do you believe in yourself? How much are you willing to stand alone with your idea and not be concerned about it, and yet want to remain connected and be connected to people? So it's not about technique or anything like that. It really has to do with digging deep in yourself, I think, you know, and having the courage to go ahead and do that, you know. Like even what I'm doing, I have to think, you know, most of my friends at this point, I'm older probably than almost everybody here, you know, would be, you know, let's go to the Bahamas, you know, and sit on the beach or something. Why are you doing this? Spending the entire day.
So have you ever looked up art in wild places? Speaking of going to a beach, there's these places you can go on, well, it's like a vacation, but you can go and make art in these wild places. It's for artists. And there's a woman in Canada that kind of well, she doesn't sponsor, but she kind of promotes these women. Well, and of course, this last year, I finally got the courage to say, I'm going to do one of these. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And of course, then we had COVID hit and nothing happened. But I'm really curious about doing one of these excursions with a friend, an artist friend, that is going to this wild place like Vancouver or New Brunswick or somewhere in Europe that's wild and out of the way to make art.
What's her name?
Rather than on the beach in the Bahamas. It's like, whoa, this is so cool. So,
well, like I think the closest thing I've done to that is I was going almost regularly every year, and then when I was starting to do this project, I had to make some choices about how I was going to spend my money and my time, you know. And I normally go to Wyoming in September, and we go up to Du Bois, and it's like so reasonable. You have like maybe 3 or 4 different instructors that you can choose to be with or not. And they have a beautiful facility. It's a convention center in the middle of the mountains. And so you can do indoor things if you want, or you can go out in the wilderness, and sometimes they'll have people that'll take you out somewhere where there are bears and all this stuff, and they have stories about, you know, it's really interesting because of the culture, you know. It's like cowboys. I mean, really cowboys. I could show you some really crazy pictures of it's like the difference between, It's amazing. I just saw this movie with Hugh Grant and another woman. They were like witnesses to a crime, and it was a comedy, a romantic comedy, and they were hid in the feds or the government or the police had to put them under secret wraps somewhere, and they sent them to Wyoming, and they had never been there, and they were living in New York their entire life. City people, where you can go get lattes and all this stuff. And, they were learning how to go horseback riding, and they were learning about bears, that you have to carry bear spray, and, the whole 9 yards. It was just that experience of being out in the wilderness, especially with that culture of people who, they love animals, they love nature. They love the animals more than I do. I mean, in a realistic, though many of them are abstractionists, or they'll have abstract elements in their painting. But to do that, for instructors, a room and board, $950 for a week. Room and board, food and
That's
everything.
nice.
That is a deal. I think it's an incredible deal. I mean,
That's
normally
awesome.
something like that would be a couple $1,000s, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you do have to get yourself there, but I think for $995, room and board, all the food, and they have 3 delicious meals every day.
Wow.
And then you've got all these instructors, and some of them will go out plein air painting, some of them will be studio painters. They'll have watercolorists, and they'll have oil painters there. They generally have 3 or 4 instructors at the same time. So you get all of those choices. It's almost overkill. You know what I'm saying? And then lots of times the instructors that were there previous years just come because they like hanging out there. So they're out there painting, and you can talk to them too. I mean, it's such a deal. I mean, it's called SKB, which stands for Susan K. Blackman. And it was a program that I guess she was really interested in promoting art for young people. And she basically died, and they came up with this program to raise funds, to continue raising funds for training art for young people. And they generally have some high school students that come, that they got scholarships and stuff like that, which are kind of fun, So it's a really one year they took us out. This one woman came, and she was they don't have many doctors there, and so they use a lot of folk art, or folk medicine rather. And she was telling me about the different berries you could eat and all this stuff. It was really interesting. So yeah, I like the idea of going in the wilderness, especially at that price.
That's a good price. Yeah.
So I've actually very much on the, I think I had a eureka moment with my painting and the combination of my artist voice this past week. And I'm just kind of excited about, part of it is dealing with my subject matter, what I want to talk about, what I want to feel. If I think, and I'm kind of, so that's kind of what I'm working through. And so that's part of my quiz. So one of it is the laryngitis. And some of the questions is just from talking to different people. I figured out that these were pain points that people had. The other one quiz result you could get with a neophyte. Now, who might think what a neophyte is?
Somebody that's new?
I didn't call him a beginning painter. And so I don't want to go through much because only one of you saw the quiz. I don't want to give it away to the others because
I still want to take it. I want to
I want
take
to take.
I want to get you to it, and I will get it fixed, and I'll send out another link with great apologies. But
So Judith, you were talking about your plein air painting, and then the abstract class, since I've been coming to your meetings here, and I'm curious, and I know I brought this up, how did the abstract class change how you approach your plein air?
Well, it's very interesting. I actually had a guest in, some of you might have seen him. His name is Fred Bell. He took the class with me as well. And his reaction and my reaction are pretty much the same, in that he said that he used to be like really uptight about everything, you know, and he's just much more relaxed now with his plein air painting, and he looks at the painting differently. He sees shapes and forms more readily, and he's not as much tied. The object is there, but it is more of a form and a shape to be adjusted to create the impact that you want to create. Mm-hmm. And it really, it's sort of like, to me, I think of it as playing a piece of music. And sometimes playing scales, which is really boring, seemingly, it just gives you a confidence and a flow to your piano playing, all and everything. And I think of playing with shapes, just shapes themselves and lines, and having them move around and seeing what happens. It gives you a confidence in just being able to look at everything that way and maybe make an adjustment, because you're able to see the abstraction in the physical thing that you're working with at the moment. Does that make any sense to you at all?
It does.
And plus the other thing, and part of it, there were watercolorists in the group, but it's harder to do, I think, with watercolor the way I was, because one of the things, the only way I think you could do it with watercolor, the way he taught me, is that you'd have to get reams and reams of paper and feel like, okay, I'm just doing this. Oh, let's try this. Let's try that. And what happens when I let the water flow here? Oh, what if I turn my paper sideways? What if I put this on top? And then you go to another piece and you just keep doing this. And you know, with the acrylic paint we were working with, you could go on top of something and move it around and opaquely. With watercolor, that's not. But you know, one of the beauties of watercolor is the way it flows. You know what I mean? And to be able to take advantage of that and learn to feel the freedom of that and let it flow in your work. We did have examples of that, but the only way they really were able to do that is by making like lots of watercolor paintings. You know what I mean? Just lots of them. Mm-hmm. You know, not necessarily big things, but and they may start with some form, but then they let it flow, and they really get very familiar with how much water to put down to let it flow a certain way. And because you're doing so many of them, you're learning really fast. Do you know what I mean? And you're not so much worried about. And that was one of the things when I talk about with between my neophyte and my laryngitis is the apprehensive explorer. That is somebody who has got the basic skills down, but they're they still are thinking there's a plan for them, a perfect plan. And they're apprehensive about exploring with the media and with the, well, there was two things, the media and with the principles that they were taught. They feel like that everything, you know, that sometimes they feel it should be just like the teacher. Mm-hmm. And so their touch and their feel about how they feel about something can be very different. And it's unique in what gives their hand. It's like your penmanship or your signature is your signature. And there's a certain sense in which there's a desire to copy, which you really have to let go of, and you have to kind of get in this exploring mode. And And that's really where you get experiences that give you a volume by which you can also then start making all sorts of decisions. But this, one of the things that's going to be coming out is the story about making either 5. There's a story I was once told from a professor who said, I did a test with my students. I had them make 5 best paintings in their entire life. They had to do this semester. They had to work on them until they were perfect. Or they were to do 100 paintings, and we were going to look at and they learned so much more from doing 100 paintings. They had some paintings that were real junkers, in there, but they had some real gems. But you got to be okay with making junkers. You just have to be okay with that, But you have to be making volumes, and your experience and your growth isn't necessarily consecutively observable. Sometimes you might have do 2 really good paintings, and then you're going to have one that's just, oh, what did I do here? Do you know what I'm talking about? So,
but don't you learn more from what you do wrong than what you do right?
Yeah, but the thing
in everything, not only in art, but other things too, but especially in art. And I love to teach students to just play, because they learn more by observing their play than by actually copying something that I'm doing. I'm a big advocate for not teaching what I do, but teaching to just play and learn by things that concepts, right? And so often when you're teaching adults who are not necessarily art education or art majors, where they're just out there to learn art, it's a little different, because they just want to sit down in so many workshops that are given. You go to a workshop, you look at the instructor, and you do what they're doing. Well, you can do that to a point, but then when you leave, can you do that? Well, maybe, but not really. And if you get to just play and learn about color and paint, and you are going to, in the long run, be more successful at what you're doing. Even if you're just an amateur artist and that's what you want to be, that's fine. It's still going to teach you more. And so I kind of took a risk when I was teaching in Green Bay, because no one was teaching that to the amateur artists. But I've had people come back, wanting more, because they're getting more out of it. So in the long run, I found, oh my gosh, this is actually working, and people are excited and they're learning, and that's the sign that it's okay.
Yeah, you want to get them to the point that they feel confident with their own little projects they make and ideas they have to play with, like, oh, I could.
And their decisions,
and their own decisions, and that if they come up with an idea, I want to try this and see how it works out. And if it doesn't work out, then they know, or maybe they'll. And also, I think it's good. There's a point where, if you're too clear in your mind, especially at an early stage of where you want to go, you get too easily discouraged, and you're still not at a point where you really can do that with a lot of success.
Agreed.
The more experiences you have painting, the easier it will be for you to make that kind of, I want to go in this direction. I want it to turn out. I want to make a dark painting. I want to make I want it to feel like a sunny morning or whatever. You'll have more experience and you'll be able to actually produce that. But if you try that too early, it gets too tight in your mind. It's better to just be playing and trying and see what you can do and experiment with. It's kind of like, if I wanted to learn to play golf, I could turn on TV and watch somebody play golf, and I might learn something. I might even take golfing lessons and watch my golfing instructor swing the ball once or twice. But really, the only way I'm going to really learn to play golf is to get on that golf course and go out there every day, or, you know what I mean, and just sometimes hit the ball in the brush. It's just, you just, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and I think that's true of anything. You know, watching, you can learn to a certain extent, but it's sometimes deceptive to think by watching you're going to really make that progress. There's this point where you just got to say, I'm going to try this. If this works, well, that's the loss of that canvas. We'll cover it up or do something else. You know, we just have to have that attitude. I don't know. That's how I think about it.
And I think for all of us, we have to have permission to just experience and fail, but also out of that experience comes success and learning, and not having that ultimate goal right off the bat. Even if we're accomplished or not accomplished or anywhere in between, just having that okay to just enjoy the moment with anything that we're doing and just go through it. I think so many people think that they have to be able to produce this thing, this image, and mostly art is not about that. And if you are an experienced art person, you know that. But if you're teaching people who are more amateur, they don't know that. And let them have the opportunity to learn how to express who they are rather than make an apple look like an apple. Who cares about that?
I think that part of it is our elementary education.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that it's, you know, it's very goal oriented. You know, this is how you make the letter A. This is how you do everything. I mean, there's a formula, and you know, and it's elementary education. But I think that, and everything, whether you made it the right way, will determine whether you get a 90, 95, 85, 75, 6, you know, and so we're continually grading ourselves, you know, and that is like the worst thing to do to yourself. Do you know what I'm saying? And we just do it like naturally. It's like, because it's ingrained in us. Oh, where am I in the class? Am I at the top of the class, or am I in the middle, or am I at the bottom? You know, we're always evaluating that. But art, if you do that with art, that can just really snuff the joy out of it. Do you know what I mean? And the fun, and it just, that's something we've got to just sort of stamp out, I think.
I think kids are so in tune to what's right and what's wrong, and is this right or is it wrong? I remember when I was teaching little kids, they would come up to me, Mrs. H, am I done? And I would say, well, are you done? What do you think? Are you done? And they'd look at me. I said, well, what were we learning about today? What were we going to make? And they would talk about it. I said, so do you think you're done? And it would be like a light bulb moment. They'd be like, oh, it's not about me. It's about you. Do you think you're done? Let them make that choice. Did they feel like they accomplished the goal that we were going out to do? Were we working on warm colors, cool colors? Were we working on using a certain medium? You know, what was the goal? And they got to make that decision. And it was hard because they didn't have that choice in so many cases.
We're not trained to really be self-directed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're trained to follow a formula, and it takes a certain amount of moxie. You know, and you know, to be honest with you though, guys, we're all, even though I'm the oldest one here, it takes a certain, we've all had enough life experiences to know that all the formulas that we were given are not necessarily correct. and sometimes we've had to come up with a better solution to whatever situation and we can kind of just ignore this nonsense of this perfect plan, and we can create our own plan and our own decision. I don't know. I've kind of gotten to the point, at least in my personal life, that certain things that I thought were, this is the way it should always be done, you know, that I was taught, this isn't working. You know, I don't need to do it this way. I can create my own way that's better. I mean, but you know, like people look at you, what are you doing that for? You know, why are you doing it that way? Why are you doing this class now? And why are you going through all this craziness to do this? You know, I mean, well, because I want to do something. I want to, you know, I'm excited. I get up in the morning and I'm excited. I got something going. But, you know, it is a little lonely. I am very fortunate. My husband tolerates this. My business partner is, you know, part of it is he's excited because he's into marketing and he's done it without computers and he's excited to learn to do it with computers. Yeah.
You know, I think that's a wonderful thing to integrate, to have artists integrate computer capabilities into their work. You know, no, really, this is a good thing. It's something kind of new, and I think computers can help artists in many ways. You know, we haven't even explored all of that. And I have to say, you know, as far as your other discussion, I've taken a number of different workshops from different artists. Through the Transparent Watercolor Society, you know, in Kenosha. And everybody has their own way. Everybody's different. And I think that was so important for me to see that, to see, hey, this guy says this, and that lady says that, you know, so you realize, well, there's a whole range of people that are doing this successfully, but they're all doing it in their own different way, you know, and that's why for me it was really helpful to see all these different ways that people approach, you know, the issue of a painting.
Hi. Okay, you know what? I forgot to tell you to take my free quiz. What is your number one painting limitation? Now, it's absolutely free. You can learn about what might be your number one painting limitation. I will review your quiz results and provide you with your own personal quiz results for free. Just click on the link below to take this 2 to 3 minute quiz, and your results will be delivered to you along with some tips on how you might overcome your limitations. I think you'll really like it. It's kind of a fun quiz. So anyway, Judith Reidy here from the Creative Zone.